I am a realist, and I think the Wolverine character is something that we can pretty much aspire to in real life, in time. Not tomorrow, not next week, not next year. It's something we can aspire to modify ourselves to be for real, medically. I'm Singapore's first local-born professional futurist operating commercially. I run a management consulting practice, StratSurf Consultancy, which is registered here as a sole proprietorship. And I am developing future-oriented strategies for clients. Basically, science fiction triggers thoughts and questions, basically, where in real life, after you watch something like that, whether you're an engineer or a scientist or a sociologist, you ask yourself a question whether this is possible, this is applicable in real life, this is going to be feasible. And it triggers a line of questioning. It triggers inquiry, investigation into that area. For example, sliding doors first appeared in the movies, in fiction movies, and then someone decided to let's make that real, automate the doors. Fiction inspires real life through inquiry. And on the reverse, what happens is if you have intimate knowledge or privileged knowledge as to certain developments that are happening in real life, as to where we are heading towards technologically, it develops ideas, it develops fantasies, which is converted into plots or settings for works of fiction. So it goes both ways. Firstly, if you look at the hype around the world in terms of what futurists would like to talk about, or mainly the forward-looking community would like to talk about, is things like singularity and uploading of consciousness and turning us into cyborgs and so on, basically focusing mainly on things like artificial intelligence. But few people are looking at the possibility of mutation as a subject, as a very real subject that could be a possibility and a part of our lives in the future ahead of us. And that's why I picked this movie, because I think that genetic mutation or human alteration is a subject that is not talked about often enough. It's not given enough focus. And there are weak signals right now. If we look at the areas of genome studies and biocomputing, and you talk about tracking the DNA codes and better understanding of the elements, I think there is a real possibility. We are getting all these signals where it's a matter of time before we use this knowledge that we are developing or acquiring towards something like mutation or modification of ourselves. Firstly, I think we'll probably need schools like that run by Professor Xavier to help modified human beings or altered personalities enhance or learn to enhance or better control or better utilize constructively and positively the enhanced abilities that they acquire from such modification or gene alteration. That's one. Number two, what really excites me is the Wolverine character, where he's able to heal very quickly from pretty much anything and everything. He's pretty much immune to anything and everything, does not seem to age. And I think this is where we are going. If you look at things like SENS research, for example, which is looking at things like preventing death, prolonging life, longevity through anti-aging. You're looking at study of therapy or therapy models or methods that prevent aging. That's the kind of thing we are looking at. We are also looking at the possibility that if you can understand how our genes work, how our cells work, at some point you can start manipulating them, and therefore you can enhance them enough to give us the sort of healing abilities that currently we only see in fiction. To be quite frank with you, quite honestly, a lot of things in there are we cannot foresee now that we'll see in real life, because there is really no scientific basis or evidence right now to suggest that we will have that sort of a possibility, such as the Storm character where she controls the weather, or the metal bending Magneto, or Cyclops shooting energy rays from his eyes, and so on. So most of this stuff is probably bound to be fiction forever. But certain things, like, for example, you have mutants scaling walls, um, or perhaps being able to breathe underwater in that franchise. I think these sort of things, over time, I won't put a timeline on these things because they're to varying degrees. But I think these sort of modifications will eventually emerge in time ahead. And what I also believe is that the kind of conflict that's depicted, where you have human mutant conflicts, it's like reflective of the kind of race conflicts you have in the present day that are existent. I believe you really won't have that sort of a thing in real life, but I think the kind of mutation that we'll talk about in real life will be very much medical and very much by choice, just as we have plastic surgery in the present day for enhancement of appearance. We'll probably have mutation or bodily alteration or genetic alteration for the purpose of physical enhancement, or for the purpose of doing what we otherwise cannot do. There really is an issue of ethics here. There is also an issue of social responsibility. For example, today we can clone human beings. It's definitely possible. If we can clone a goat, we can clone a sheep, we can clone a dog, we can clone a human being. It's possible. And however, it's not been tried because, to our knowledge at least, we don't know if anyone out there has secretly actually tried to clone a human being. But it's not legal, it's not legally accepted, it's seen as a taboo because it's just too unethical. You're basically playing God. You are going against nature in a way where we don't know what the consequences are yet, perhaps, and perhaps you're not ready to explore that. But think about it this way: if we engage in biohacking or genetic modifications to help humanity survive the changing climate, to survive new patterns or strains of viruses, or things just like mutated influenza, if you're talking about engaging in biohacking or genetic modification, genetic changes for the sake of preserving human life or protecting human life or securing longevity for all of us, after a point, will we still be calling that unethical? Will we still be calling that irresponsible? Will we still be calling it radical? Will the term radical be present in the equation? We need to ask those questions at some point for life preservation purposes, to avoid existential threats to ourselves. We'll have to engage in exercising the knowledge that we are acquiring right now in these areas, in the areas of genetic sciences, genome, biohacking, whatever you want to call it. For our survival, we'll need to use that. So that's the medical stage, just as you have surgery to stop a person from dying, to fix his heart, to fix his internal organs. That's necessity. The next stage is enhancement. You have plastic surgery. So when you talk about genetic changes or biohacking, the first stage will be medical, and it's a matter of time before eventually it becomes a tool for enhancement. Certain things that I can talk about from some of the other movies we earlier discussed was something like Elysium, where there's a very real possibility that we may develop, it's one of the possible scenarios for the next 25, 35 years, where we have a real life separation of classes across the globe that's universal, where you have very much the haves, who could end up with everything, who have the kind of science and technology and medical resources and abundant resources of all kinds at their disposal. And then you have another class of society that's just that's battling for survival every single day of their lives. They're left out of whatever human capacity we have developed, because it's not shared across. And there's this division that keeps the two apart. So that's something that I think was socially readable in the Elysium story. Another thing that's very, very real, I think this has been experimented with and it's been under development for a very long time. We've talked about the exoskeleton, which is the real life Iron Man suit. So whatever we see in the Iron Man franchise, it's a matter of time that something like that will be developed and deployed either for law enforcement purposes or for military purposes. Just to begin with, actually right now we talk about the exoskeleton, it's very much in development for military use, or it can be used for hazardous jobs where a person has a threat of, faces the risk of being crushed to death by something or being torn apart by a machine or something of that nature. So you put on a suit like that that pretty much protects you. You can't be hit or cut by anything, you can't be burned, and you operate it with your mind, so you don't exert physical strength. So these sort of suits are probably going to be very real. They are a lot less exciting than X-Men, but we'll probably have very real life Iron Man in our lifetimes. And I think although these things will start probably with military purpose or law enforcement purpose or for hazardous jobs, I think there'll come a time where we all will have Iron Man suits in our storerooms or in our bedrooms at home, where we put them on to go out and do stuff in. Because I think at some point someone will learn to commercialize these things and sell it to all of us for very practical day-to-day uses.